Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session on AI IDEs. What do you choose? I am your host and speaker, Brian Randell. As you hopefully know by now, I'm also one of the conference co-chairs. In case you haven't been to a talk by me, this is information. Email address is up there. My Twitter/X handle is there. I'm not there too often, but it mostly just I'm not on social media as much as I used to. Kind of getting old and would rather spend time with my children and honestly watch the NFL right now. So, but you can ping me there. There's a dormant DevOps.fm podcast that Mickey and I do, and we keep saying next year will be the year we bring it back. So we'll see about that. My GitHub repo is /Brian Randell, and my blog is blog.brianrandell.com, which I did some blogging this last month. Unfortunately, my grandmother passed away, and that kind of just took things off. So we are getting to this time of year where we do advent calendars, and there's often these things where people do 30 days of something. So I plan to restart it for the holiday season. And so if you're interested in Copilot, you'll want to check that out. I also have co-written a book that we finally are able to give out. It's called Essential DevOps. With the housekeeping out of the way, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the current landscape. And with anything in AI, this is a crazy dynamic world. I mean, I literally have to change and rethink what I talked about today based upon stuff from last week, okay? And definitely the last month. But I knew that was coming up. So I've got some things to talk about, in particular, things that I use. So you're going to get some very opinionated things based upon my experience. The key thing, no matter what you see from me here, is you need to try it yourself. You need to try it in your environment, with your hardware, and with your code base, okay? You need to understand what your tolerance is for different types of behavior and abilities. What type of developer are you? In fact, probably one of the biggest things is you'll notice the title says IDE. Well, it turns out that IDE is just a part of the discussion because of the way that AI is evolving rapidly. We think about both access in DevOps pipelines, access at the CLI, and this notion of what we call agentic AI, where we can have code running somewhere outside of our local computers. And on that note, it's always good to start a few demos when you have AI involved because some of these things might take a moment. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite things that I've been using on a day-to-day basis that isn't Copilot. I am on Mac OS Sequoia, so I'm not on the latest because I don't want to be. It scares me. But in all seriousness, I am using, for my shell, what is called ZSH. This is the default shell in the current version of Mac. I also could be using Bash, or I could be using PowerShell, and this will work on Windows as well. It also will work in tons of flavors of Linux if that's your game. And in doing so, you'll notice a couple things. First of all, I have this prompt that tells you a lot of data, and this is called Oh My Posh. But the key thing to note is that it tells me that I'm using GitHub and that I'm on a feature branch. So before I do any work here, I'm going to create a new branch for this live demo. So we'll do git checkout -b, and we'll call this live/Claude code return. Okay, so now I'm on this Claude Code branch. And so to use Claude Code, and obviously all these things require some installation and possibly some configuration. But I want to show you how I might do something with Claude right now. So before I do, let me just switch over to something that's a little more visual, and we'll go to VS Code. And you'll see that I'm in the same repo here. And if you look down here at the bottom, you'll see that I have switched to live Claude Code. And I'm doing this only so you can see the visual representation of what's going on. If we look in the source folder, you'll see I have a web project and a web.test.unit project and a database project. The database project is for working with SQL Server. And you'll see I have an SQL Server that is running here on my Mac inside Docker. These are kind of the environments I'm working with. And it's having fun time connecting, so don't really need that. And then you'll see there's a database project that shows you what's available. I'm showing this because I might just go YOLO and off-road on some of the demos. They're not all completely planned, but we're going to do something pretty straightforward here. When I run the application, so let's do that right now, and let's go to Solution Explorer, right-click, debug, start new instance. I've shown this a few times if you've been in sessions, so some of you that were in the workshop on Monday have seen this. It's a very simple web application called Reading Time. And if we look in here, there's a URL. So I'll click it, open it up, and it's a tour de force of beauty and wonder. So what we're going to do here is we're going to ask Claude to make some changes. Now, I'm going to stop this, and we're going to go back over to the terminal. So to use Claude, you just type Claude. And it comes up, and the first thing it's going to say is, do you want to trust this code? Yes, I can continue, go for it. Now, over here on the side, you'll see it said auto update. Now, I always look for that. They tend to update almost every day. So what I do quickly is I exit. So you notice the slash command is going to bring up different things I can do. And so I'll do it again. And now I'm ready to go. So right now, it's in this mode to where it's going to go, I will do things for you, but I don't really understand your environment yet. That is the first time I've used Claude with this code base. So what I could do is here I can type slash, and you can see that there's a bunch of different commands. Some are UI related, some are like, hey, make sure Claude is still working okay. I can give feedback. I can hook it into my IDEs. And then you'll notice this option here, init. Init lets Claude look at your code base and create a documentation file for itself. So I'm going to do that and give it a second to get started. And this is important for all of the agents and tools you're going to use. Is if you try, and then the next thing it's going to say is, hey, I want to do something. You're going to let me do this. And you'll notice it has 3 choices. Yes, that's for the command. Yes, allow reading from during this session. And then no, tell Claude what you want to do differently. I'm going to say yes, and don't bug me about reading during this session. And this is important because this is one CLI I'm going to mention here. Each CLI has different levels of autonomy out of the box. These agents do the same thing. And so it becomes important for you to ease into these environments and understand how they work. For example, when Google first released their Gemini CLI, it kind of could be quite destructive, in other words, if it wanted to, right? It would do things, and people would be like, freaking out, delete all my files, right? It's like, well, you're using version control. No? Okay, well, that's part of your problem. They've all gotten a lot better at that, and some of them, like Gemini, have what's called sandbox mode, which will isolate what it can do. And others, the reverse is you can say, hey, you can have access to my entire computer. I wouldn't do that. I don't do that, but you could do it, okay? So what it does is it goes through and it starts, in this case, looking at my code, figuring things out. So it's going to create this Claude file. Now, each of the AIs often have their own file. And then there's this pseudo standard that we've come up with called agents.md, a markdown file, which if you have that, tools will look for it as well. And then you can have individual configuration files nested within your project that give extra detail. This is very important when you work on things like where you have lots of different projects inside a single Git repo. Okay? Summary. You're going to want to use these various helper files to guide your agent. In addition, it helps it so you don't have to tell it the same baseline every single time. Okay? So now it says, hey, you want to be able to create. Yes, you can create. Now notice it says, yes, allow all edits. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that yet. But I'm going to say yes just because I'm doing a demo. And I use Claude a lot, and I feel pretty good about it, okay? So what it did was it created this claude.md file. So what I'm going to do here is just go open to another tab. And I'm going to do cat Claude. No, where did it put it? Probably put it in the parent folder. No? There it did. Okay, so what did it do? It wrote out this markdown file, and it's busy enough to where maybe I'll open it up in VS Code real quick. So let's go back over to code. Okay, so made a nice thing. Project overview, what it found, wrote the commands on how you do it, talks about the database project, it talks about some details, and part of this, it actually went and found that I had some instruction files related to Copilot. So by doing some work for Copilot, I gave Claude a step up. So again, documentation is king, right? The better you are at articulating your wants, desires, needs, and your boundaries, the more you will get out of agents. Okay? All right, so it's now got this. Now it's in this mode where it's like, hey, I'm ready to go, dude. Let's go have some fun. So I'll go back over to the Claude tab. And now I'm going to press Shift-Tab. And notice what happened there. If you look on the screen, it said, hey, you're in plan mode. Plan mode lets you tell the AI what you want to do, and it will come back with a plan that you can then tweak or approve. Or you can say, forget it, you're going to go crazy. So what I'm going to do is zoom back out, and I'm going to do the following. Currently, if we were to look at the code, you'd find that my service class is very simple, and it doesn't talk to the database. So we're going to do one thing simple first, and I want to see how well it does it. And I'm going to ask it to add some additional methods to the services class. Currently, the service doesn't have many methods to provide information. Now I'm going to use the slash key to give me a new line, and then I'm going to type the following. Add a count property, add a find by author property or method. Notice that's all I'm going to say. I could be more explicit, but we'll just do that. Add a find by book title method. The above should be implemented based on the current data storage. Oh, I have a typo. That's okay. It turns out it reads bad spelling. Now I'm going to say, after you do that, I'd like to connect the application to the database. I would like a data layer implemented as a .NET class library that uses Dapper, and I would like the web UI to talk to this new library. Finally, make sure all the unit tests work. Plan this out, but don't start without my permission. Boom. Okay, I'm going to let that run. Let's go talk a little bit more. And we'll give it a second because I just want to make sure. And notice I can also tell it right there in the center of the screen. You can show thinking. Okay, you can actually see this step by step on how the AI is reasoning through this. Okay, sorry, keep going. Okay, so that's going to do its business. Now, while that runs, let's talk about a few things. So we look at the IDE. So first of all, IDE, Integrated Development Environment. And again, in the world of Microsoft, they have one IDE for developers, and that is Visual Studio, full stop. Visual Studio Code is not considered a full IDE for a variety of reasons. It's considered an editor that has a rich plugin ecosystem. That said, that's where you're starting at, you're kind of being like Microsoft marketing, trying to justify why one's versus the other, okay? So the bottom line is, we're going to use the term IDE across the board, understanding there is a more pedantic definition. The key thing is that we start looking at what's going out there, right? Depending on the numbers you look at, one of these things is from Stack Overflow. their survey, 76 to 82% of developers are currently using or planning to use AI, right? And so when you think about that is, where do you want to use AI? When I first really got heavily involved in this, it's kind of this weird second part of my career. I first started getting into the world of AI and things like machine learning when I was doing some teaching and consulting in the 2010s, so around 2013 up until about 2019. And in doing so, I was looking at it from the Azure perspective. Azure had their own machine learning portal that was a subset of the Azure portal, right? Things are very different. They also introduced something called cognitive services. And they had a thing that I did some work on for Microsoft to build some samples called the Microsoft Bot Framework. These were all in the AI space, right? And it was interesting, but there were parts of that made my head hurt. I wasn't, I'm not a math wizard. Unlike Eric Boyd, that stuff actually is a good nightcap, puts me to sleep. And calculus, I think I could spell it. It's just, some of that just doesn't work for me. But I love data, so that always was a good thing for me. Well, then, took a break. COVID happened. And then fast forward to that moment that really changed for a lot of us is when ChatGPT came out. And when ChatGPT came out, it was like, this is exciting. And so the way I first approached working with AI is, like a lot of us, is I went to ChatGPT and started, how can you help me write code? And so I would ask it to do things, and it would spit out code. And I would take that code, and I would copy and paste it into my tools. I would compile it, and then I would say, you suck, this doesn't work. And I'd go back, and it would do stuff. But then there were moments where it did stuff amazing. One of my favorites is I had written some code in the day that would talk to Hyper-V. Hyper-V is Microsoft's virtualization technology. It runs on Windows client and server. And I'd written some stuff in .NET FX using the system.management libraries that are available in .NET. And those, in turn, are wrappers on top of WMI. So the Windows Management Instrumentation Framework. And basically, WMI is how you do a lot of the system stuff. It's nasty. It's based upon COM. Anybody live the COM lifestyle in the 90s? That's right. COM is love. Woohoo! Now, when you think about these layers of indirection, then it gets kind of complicated, right? You're marshaling data between managed and unmanaged code. The way the enumerators work in WMI requires, if you don't dispose of them properly, you leak memory like a sieve. And so I have experience here, and that was my goal, was take something that I understand and see if AI can, one, help me, two, make it better. The first impression, I'll just say, it was a failure. It would go down a path, and then it would get itself in a loop, and I'd say, that doesn't work, you're getting this error. And it'd go, oh, I'm sorry, hold on, chugga, chugga, chugga. Oh, do this is wonderful, it'll work great. Go and do it. No, this works. And I would give it the compile errors, and then I would give it the runtime errors and stuff. And by the way, that's one of the problems with the WMI, this abstraction layer. You look like on .NET, you're programming against something that's strongly typed. Underneath the covers, a lot of it is based upon IDES, so it's not. And so it looks good at compile time, but at runtime, it blows up. And so I did this until I would get to the point about 8 levels deep where it would start over and say, oh, do this. And I go, hold on, don't you realize that was wrong back there? Oh, you're right, do this. It would actually just get itself in that loop. Well, what's happened here, and what we see with what Claude's doing and what we have with a lot of these newer models, is this notion of reasoning, where you can watch it go through its thought process, and you can even guide it and go tell it, wait, hold on, cowboy, you're going down the wrong path. And so what we see is that there's this huge market growth opportunity. Again, looking at some of the numbers, you'll see figures from 2 billion to 25 billion by the year 2030. There's even some more edge case numbers that are, closer to like 75 to 80 billion dollars. So there's a lot of money being invested. And then if you look at some of the upcoming tools, right away, the last month from GitHub Universe, we had the announcement of GitHub Agent HQ with a feature that they don't really call, but you can actually act like mission control of your agents, and the ability to use multiple agents from multiple vendors with Copilot on github.com. And one of the first ones that is available today is the fact you can use the Codex agent from OpenAI. So when we start looking at the major architectures, there's kind of 3 things that we're looking at. First of all, plugin extension architecture. This is what you have with things like VS Code, where it has its own way of working and then use extensions and plugins to augment its behavior. Now, this was 100% true even with Copilot in the beginning. Then Microsoft and GitHub decided, let's embed it, where when you install VS Code, Copilot is there. Unfortunately, that made some people annoyed. There were people that said, I don't want your AI at all, or I don't want your AI. So even though it is there now by default, you can disable it, which is something you may want to do. I'll show this when I show VS Code, but one of the things you want to consider when you start evaluating these plugins is it sometimes isn't good to have 4 AIs in your environment all at once trying to do stuff. So you might want to take the approach, one chef in the kitchen is good, and profiles are a good way to do that. And so you can disable Copilot on a profile basis. Then you have standalone AI first IDEs. And again, this is one of those things that is somewhat loosey-goosey. Microsoft is calling Visual Studio 2026 an AI IDE from the ground up, and that they've really rethought what Visual Studio means. And it is true, right? Copilot is embedded across the board in all sorts of interesting places. In fact, one of the reasons I still use Visual Studio much more than I use Visual Studio Code, even though there is really good C# support and it would run natively on my Mac on VS Code versus me having to RDP or run a Windows machine, which I do like, is that the debugging experience with Visual Studio proper is still the best. Particularly as a C# developer, hands down. I also have the ability to do debugging for web applications in JavaScript, and I can even do T-SQL debugging with SQL Server. So it is still my go-to. And the fact that they now have Copilot in there for things like debugging, Copilot in there for performance, and Copilot, of course, for all the code editing and stuff, means it really does feel that way. And I'm really liking Visual Studio 2026 so far, just from the performance enhancements alone. Other IDEs that claim to be that way, well, we'll talk about them. And then there's this notion of the CLI, these terminal-based experiences, which is what we're seeing right now with Claude. So let's just go over and check on it, because it may be stuck waiting for me to tell it something. Oh, there you go. So before I present I need to clarify. So it wants to ask the questions. Keep the book model simple with author as string. Update book model to match database schema. Create separate DTOs for database versus UI. I'm going to do number 2. And notice there's number 4, which types something. So we'll do that. And we want to do partial match. That's fine. Yes, created this, or keep it simple like the current implementation. Go YOLO. Yep, that's good. This experience right here, again, is definitely very popular if you come from a non-Windows environment, definitely with the Linux heads, but obviously lots of people on the Mac. And one of the things I will tell you is, sadly, Windows sometimes is a second-class citizen for this experience. When they first came out with Claude, you had to work with it through WSL, which meant you effectively were using it on top of Linux with Windows. They're realizing that Windows developers are kind of a good market, because a lot of us work for companies that spend money. And these people are realizing that, having a great market cap is only so good when you're actually making money. So Claude now has a native Windows installer, for example, now. It does a much better job. But be aware that some of the things you might see here as well may not work as well on Windows. Oh, let's just go YOLO. Oh, wait. Would you like to proceed? Oh, sorry. This is your plan. Okay. Oh, boy. Oh, dear. Now, there's a lot going on here. And what I could do is say, okay, hold on. Keep planning. This looks really good. Can you save out a planning claude.md file to the root of the repo? Again, that's because of the way it thinks. Now, he's thinking 9 seconds. There you go. And it says, I'll be happy to save that. Would you like me to create the file now? I'll at least need to exit plan mode or include this create file as part of the implementation plan when you approve the overall plan. I'm going to tell it to do it right now. Oh, come on. You're really thinking for more than 1 second. Are you there? Okay, it was my bad. He told me I had to exit plan mode to tell it to do it, and I didn't do that. That's why I was sitting there going, what do you want to do? Come on. There you go.
Are you using a premium version of Claude?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. So I'm going to get to that with all the products. I am using, in this mode, an API key. Almost all the products, I'm going to say that just in case someone's changed their licensing. Cursor, by the way, are the worst about changing what you get for what you pay for. Almost every use, with that caveat, have a free plan. Then a majority of them offer a monthly or annual subscription. Brian's tip is do not commit to a yearly or annual subscription unless you some way to get your money back, or you know you're committed because you've got the experience. Things rapidly to overcommit to one person for another, with the idea that you're going to save money. And part of that's because with these monthly plans, and both Cursor and Claude, which is Anthropic is the company, have done adjustments to what you get. So you sign up for X, and then they decide that they have to change it to Y because maybe people were being too aggressive with what they were giving them. Because very few people want to give you these exact numbers of what you get. They'll be like, well, you get a lot of requests. You get 10 times more requests than that. Well, how much was that? Well, it's kind of fuzzy. With the API request, by using the API, I know exactly what I'm spending, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that in a second. But that's what I'm doing. Okay, there you go. It's save this out, and I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead. I'm just going to go YOLO since I've got version control. In fact, you can see there are these token usages. This is going through and showing me that, hey, it's spending money right now. Okay? So now it's done. And I really should look at the plan, but I'm going to say, yes, go for it. And so it's going to go do some work. So we got these CLIs. We got these IDEs. How are we going to figure out what to do? Okay. Looking at the market leaders, GitHub Copilot is the first, and it is at the top of the heap, right? The numbers are crazy. Microsoft, GitHub used to publish a lot of data, and then because of Microsoft being a publicly traded company and the fact that with AI now that can actually move the stock price, they're a little more conservative about publishing numbers outside of normal reporting periods. But definitely, the number is over 50% of the market share and definitely over 20 million users worldwide. This is paid users, okay? And that's a key statistic here because Copilot is available free to each and every one of you as long as you just have a GitHub account. Now, because it's free, you're going to be limited in what you can do relative to a paid plan, but keep that in mind. So technically, GitHub at some point can say, we've had, 50 million people activate the free plan, and then we still get paid by over 20 million, right? But those figures are pretty good. I think they're a little higher. Cursor is a from the ground up IDE we're going to talk about. They're currently valued at around $9 billion, right? There's Codium and Windsurf. Claude Code, which has reasoning, which is what we're using here in the CLI. And you have JetBrains has their AI integration, which supports third parties like Copilot, like Claude, and then they have their own AI called Junium, I think it is the name. It's Junie. I always forget that wrong. And so when we start looking at this, we start thinking about how are we going to approach this? As a Microsoft show and as someone who primarily lives in the Microsoft ecosystem, this is what I care about. And so why would you want to pick GitHub Copilot? Well, besides being the market leader, there's a few things that really come to mind. Number one, they're backed by a company, Microsoft, that has shown its commitment to the Microsoft ecosystem, right? It's kind of like, duh. Yet Microsoft has been much different over the last decade, 2 decades, with Satya Nadella coming on, this commitment to open source, the fact that Microsoft loves Linux, right? At any one time, more than 50% of the compute on Azure is Linux-based. SQL Server loves Linux, right? We have native versions. I'm running SQL Server on Mac, right? The fact that almost every GitHub employee, for the most part, uses a Mac. Microsoft is a much different company than the 1990s Borg version that a lot of people still, unfortunately, talk about. And so Copilot has rich integration that works inside Visual Studio Code, works inside Visual Studio proper. And so really it is a compelling piece of technology. It is cross-platform, and because it comes out under GitHub, it does mean that it is not Microsoft-only technology. In fact, it actually handles things like Python and JavaScript. It feels like sometimes even better than how it handles C#. In addition, because of this integration, we have things where they bring in Copilot to Azure boards. We have Copilot being able to talk to the Azure DevOps MCP server to where if you're committed to that environment, you can use it. And there is the Azure MCP server, again, providing this deep integration between these larger parts of the Microsoft ecosystem right inside Copilot, which means any place Copilot is, you're going to have that experience. And so then we have Visual Studio 2026, which I talked about, right? Copilot built in this quote-unquote AI-first architecture, right? They really rethought, where does AI live? It's not just something that starts out of the chat window, but it's baked into all different parts of the application to where you can get that assistance when you want it and when you need it. Now, beyond this, though, when we start thinking of plugins, there are other ones out there. And again, the idea of the plugin is that you're going to bring this into your environment of choice, and it's going to augment your interactions. So there's a product called Codium, and Codium has a free tier with currently unlimited autocomplete and supports over 70 languages. Tab9 is another. And then Amazon has their Q developer integration. And the interesting thing, of course, with this is if you're committed to the Amazon cloud, this is something worth seriously considering. They have been kind of pushing this. In addition, I forgot for some reason when I put this together, they also have Kiro. Kiro is a planning first fork of Visual Studio Code that basically is taking we're going to give you an IDE experience that hooks in to their AI experience. So when you look at these things, there's a bunch of different benefits. For example, Codium is FedRAMP High certified. So if you work in a certain government, that might be something you want to look at. Tab9 does support private model training on your code. And that can range as little as $12 a month to $39 a month. And of course, Amazon Q Developer, which kicks in at $19 a month, has that deep AWS service integration and really helping you with infrastructure as code type of things. So if you're doing the Amazon cloud, those can be pretty compelling. And then you have the fact that yesterday and even today we had some internet issues. And maybe you also have to work in an environment that's air-gapped, or you have people in your company that don't want your code going up to the cloud, no matter what guarantees are provided by the vendor. Well, you can use Visual Studio Code with Ollama and the Continue extension. The name is not great. There's a Continue extension which will allow you to have an agent experience without having to pay monthly. You just have to have the right hardware. And I'm going to show you that in a second right now as well. So let's jump out of here and let's go see what's going on with Claude. So the key thing to understand about how Claude is working right now, this is running, talking to the cloud. So I have to have an active internet connection, but it's running right here in my shell on this branch. Okay, this is great. And I'm going to tell it, yes, let's see, we want to be able to do this. As it goes through, you can give it permission just for the session, or if you want, you can modify your Claude files, and there's a configuration setting where you can say, these are commands you don't have to ask me about. And again, I encourage you to do it interactive at first and get to know how the AI agent behaves. Now, while this is running, since this is on my machine and I don't want to mess with Git work trees right now, let's actually switch first to Visual Studio, then we'll come back and deal with Ollama and Continue. So over here, I've got a remote desktop session. This is Visual Studio 2026. What we'll see here is I have GitHub Copilot Chat. And as you'd expect, all the things are hooked up. So if you go to account settings, one of the things that Visual Studio 2026 installer will do is if you have Visual Studio 2022 or 2019, I've tested on those environments, it will offer to install Visual Studio 2026 in the same fashion as the version you're migrating from. So it'll pick all the same workloads and offer to migrate your extensions and your settings, which is really great. One of the things it also does is it migrates your accounts. And what you'll see here is it'll tell me which GitHub account I'm using. And if I come over here to Copilot, I can see, for example, my Copilot usage, what plan I'm on. I can manage it, etc. And so you see you have the chat experience here. And if we go over to reading time, this is the same project we're looking at on Mac OS. And so we can come over here, and if we go to Copilot Chat, there's been some enhancements. A couple things to be aware of. And so if we come and zoom in over here, right, a few things to be aware of is one is this item right here. This is your MCP tool server support. So MCP servers are something that's supported in Visual Studio Code. It's supported by almost all of the tools I'm talking about. In fact, I have Claude Code configured to talk to the Microsoft Learn documentation MCP server because it gives it information about how to do .NET Microsoft technology better. That's one type of MCP server. The other type are ones that can do things on your behalf, like the GitHub MCP server or the Azure DevOps one, which can, create a pull request, create an issue, update, commit, etc. Then you'll see over here the context, right? And then you'll see these two things right down here. Number one, what mode do you want to be in? And number two, what model do you want to use? Okay, so I've kind of avoided the whole model discussion because so far I'm only using Claude. Turns out Claude Code will let you pick from different Anthropic models. Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code will let you pick from an enormous list of models based upon, one, the plan of Copilot you're using. In other words, are you paying for it or not? And number two, what you/your administrator has allowed you to use. In this case, Brian Randell, I'm the Brian Randell administrator. I've said I can use all the models that my plan allows. So that means if I click this drop down here, you'll see that there are a number of different models that are available. And so if we scroll down, you'll see things like ChatGPT 5, you'll see Claude Opus 4.1, Haiku 4.5, Gemini 2.5 Pro. So right there in that dialog, you're getting models from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, all because you have a Copilot account. And that Copilot account gives it to you here, Visual Studio proper, Visual Studio Code, the Copilot CLI, as well as in github.com. So again, you can see why Copilot really is the market leader because of the reach it has and the partnerships. Now, the one thing you'll notice is this 1x, 0.33x, and then 10 times x. Any of the models that have a multiplier by them use what are called premium requests. Premium requests are only available on the paid plans, and based upon your plan, you get a certain number of premium requests per month. After that, if you want more, you have to enable a feature which is pay for more, and they're priced out at different amounts. In the case of Claude Opus, however, because that is their top of the line, platinum level thinking supermodel, it costs you 10 requests per request you make. When you do a request in the cloud and you use a Copilot agent, it only uses one premium request at a time. So there's kind of some ways to get a lot of value there. Although you don't have full control over the model choice with GitHub Copilot agent in the cloud yet. Then you'll see these items down here that have 0 next to them. That means you effectively have unlimited requests when you're using that in chat or in your code completion. Okay, then you notice there's an option to manage models. And then here's the big thing here. This item right here lets you choose the mode you want. Now, over the last couple years, as they've introduced chat and enhanced it in Copilot, they have introduced different types of modes. Ask is the traditional chat mode. I ask you a question, you give me an answer. It's up to me, the human, to implement the answer. Agent mode is over here going, you ask me what to do, I will go actually do it inside your IDE and modify things, and where appropriate, I will ask permission. When you use agent mode, that also lights up the ability then to come over here and use MCP servers. Now, the red X is telling me, hey, you need to re-authenticate is what that error is. It just means there's some error talking to the MCP server. Then you'll notice that there is the Azure Development one. There's the GitHub Copilot one. there's the Microsoft Learn one, which I used to have to add, but thankfully they got the hint and said, Microsoft developers probably want to have easy access to the Microsoft Learn MCP server. So it's now built in, you just have to turn it on. And this, by the way, is only a read-only thing. It doesn't change anything. Then you'll see NuGet has a new MCP server, and that's it for built-in. You can add Azure DevOps, etc. So these things augment how agent model can work. And so if you recall, we asked Claude to do some stuff. And, see, you got to keep telling it to, I have no idea if it's going to work, but, it's been cranking away. So now let's go over to the folder in VS Code. And there's the planning file. Okay, so I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to go back over here to Windows. I'm going to say at workspace. Oh, you know what? I should change my branch here. Let's do a new branch. Good question. At workspace says, look at everything in the current context to make decisions. So you can say, just look at this file by doing a particular file. You can do a particular project, etc. In fact, let me go back. That's actually a great question. If I go and hit at, you'll see that there's different things. Talk to the debugger, talk to GitHub, use the new modernize feature, which, by the way, if you're on .NET FX but wanting to go to .NET Core, .NET 10, that's your friend. Talk to the profiler, talk to VS, or ask about your workspace, which means all the projects and solutions. On the other hand, you can come over here and do that hash symbol, the pound symbol, and notice you can come in here and get access to individual items. You can get to individual files, classes, etc. And it's basically to guide it and say, look, don't be wild and crazy, don't be ADHD, just focus on this. But because I'm going to say do a plan mode, I want it to have access to everything. So I'm going to do that, and you're like, well, plan mode, right? It'd be great if we had a plan mode. Yeah, it would. Oh, guess what? Turns out if you go to Tools Options, and we come over here to Copilot, and we click on Copilot, enable planning. So this is because it's not completely done, but now that I've done that, so we're going to say at workspace. You notice it says active document. It'll use that for context, but we can get rid of that. And now we can say Control V. And now notice what's happening there. It says, I'm going to gather references. I'm going to go through and look at what you set up here, and I'm going to do that. And then over here, it has access to these MCP servers, and now it's going through and it's looking at what's going on. So it's planning just like Claude did, only it's doing it right here inside Visual Studio. And by the way, what's nice about this, if you're more of a GUI person and have more than one monitor, you can take Copilot and put it on another monitor, make it wider, make it easier to read. So let's let it do some stuff, and we'll get another agent going. Let's talk about this aspect of life. So the reality is that we're having some fun here with Claude, and it's cranking away, but it has to talk to the cloud. It also means I have to pay Anthropic money. But maybe I'm a cheapskate, or maybe I don't trust the man, and I want to do this all locally. Or maybe I have to work in an air-gapped environment. So what you can do is set up 3 pieces of technology. The first one is something called Ollama. Okay, and Ollama, if we search for it, has a little GUI application now. This is an enhancement that came earlier this year. And what this will let you do is do chatting right within this GUI application with a model. And notice that these models have some interesting icons on them. Some of them have the cloud. Footnote, this is a new thing that they're doing because Ollama started as a pure open source project that now has a company component, and like everybody, they got to eat as well. So they're offering paid services that have a cloud component. And this is for them to say that, look, you don't trust Microsoft, you don't trust Google, but you trust us. And remember, you have access to our source code. We will provide you access to high-speed cloud computing, but you're going to be in control and have a lot of the privacy options. Now, again, it's leaving your computer. On the other hand, you'll notice I have GPT-OSS:120. This is a 120 billion parameter open source model that came from OpenAI that I've downloaded to my machine. And then you'll see that there are other models I can download as well. And then the ones that don't have downloads next to them are also on my machine. Some of these range in size from a gig to others are multi-gigabyte, tens of gigabytes of disk space, to where you can have some of the bigger models at like 672 gigabytes of disk space. Now, the problem with the size of the model is you want the model to fit in memory. I'm on an M3 Max MacBook Pro, thank you, I had to remember the computer model. And so my memory limit is 128 gigabytes of unified memory. So I can run some big models, but not the biggest ones. That said, unified memory in the Mac is not as fast as what I could run, for example, on my 4090 or my 5090. Problem is my 4090 only has 24 gigs and my 5090 only has 32 gigs. And the wife will not let me sell one of the children to get an RTX 6000 because that's $8,000. Okay, there you go. And it's a joke for anyone watching the recording. I'm not selling the child. The audience knows I'm kidding. Yes, Brian, right? Yes, okay, thank you. But I don't have to use this GUI. I can use a variety of tools to do this. One of them is this UI here called Bolt. So Bolt allows me to do a new chat, and I can specify that I'm using Ollama or different online services. And when I use Ollama, I can specify the model I want. So the bottom line is you can pick the model you want to use, and when you use it, and let's just use one of the smaller ones like 5. 5.4 is actually a very nice model that comes from Microsoft. Tell me a 1,000 word story on why C# is a great programming language. Pay homage to its creator. Okay? So I'm going to do that. If we go over to Activity Monitor and go over to the graphs, what we're going to see here is my GPU is going to spike. There it is. See that right there? All the way up where my mouse pointer is, up near the top of the screen. And that means it has loaded the model from disk, loaded it into memory, and it's using it to answer my questions. So if we go back to Bolt, you'll see it has written me a thing. Now notice what's happening. It's kind of chunking, but it's kind of pokey. This is related to tokens per second. And as I told you, the number of tokens per second that you're going to get on a Mac is going to be often slower than you'll get on NVIDIA GPUs. I've done some tests, and sometimes it can be as much as 10 to 1 in performance, okay? But again, there's a trade-off. Oh, the other thing is, if you can hear it, my fan is kicked in, because that is one of the common things you can do is if you want to get the fan to kick up on an Apple Silicon machine, do some AI. Okay, so that was me using Phi. So load it in the memory, and then I can dump it and get more memory, or I can let Ollama manage the memory. Now, they're like, okay, this is cool, Brian, but what does it have to do with VS Code and IDEs? Let me show you. So first of all, it says it did all these things. And it says, I need to deploy the database, verify the connection string, and run the web app. It will now connect to the database instead of use in-memory data. Okay. We will maybe try that if I have time, because I'm going to spend more time getting the connection string to work than anything else, and you will probably have to see my password. So I'll then want to change it afterwards. But in either case, we'll come back to that. What I want to do is I want to save this work. So what I'm going to come over to is the Visual Studio Code, and we'll see all the files that went through and modified. I want to give you this kind of more visual view. So it went through and modified all those files. I now have the opportunity to look at it, check it, test it, etc. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to save all these changes to this branch. Live demo. And then I am going to restage them. We'll do a commit. All right, now we'll come back over here and we'll do a new tab. We'll leave this the way it is. Get branch, and we'll do get checkout feature / test -db -SQL 2005 -docker -Mac OS. Oh, thank you. You know what we should do instead? This is what my friend Ian always tells me. If you can copy Brian. Okay. Okay, now we'll do a get branch -B. And what did I do earlier? Oh no, we want to get checkout. I don't know why I'm doing branch. And we'll do live Olama demo. So did I not just tell it to do that, or did it get lost? There we go. Okay, so now we're going to go to Visual Studio Code. Down here, you'll see I have a squirrel, and this is because I put a custom icon for the profile. That's also known as the ship squirrel, which is a GitHub mascot. It doesn't get a lot of love like Mona, but it's there. And you'll see I have multiple profiles. One of the profiles I have is one called Olama with C#. When I switch to this profile, a couple things are going to happen. Number one, it changes the color for me. It helps me remember that. Number two, it changes the extensions that are loaded. And one of them is this extension called Continue, an open source Copilot clone. Okay, it's obviously not Copilot, although it's going to be interesting because now that Copilot is open source, the extension's open source, we'll have to see what happens. Now, you'll notice what happens. I got this window over here called Continue. And if I click the drop down here, you'll see this will give me some continue commands like open chat. Come on, open chat. Oh, and by the way, it may be hard to see, but let me zoom down there. You'll notice that Copilot is turned off. Okay? So I'm using continue, and now it's on next edit, and let's tell it I want to open chat. There we go. Okay. So a couple things I want to point out about what's going on here. I've already configured it to talk to Olama. So Olama is sitting on my machine, and it's accessible through a command line as well as that GUI I showed you, and it has a open API endpoint. I've configured that. Then you'll notice that they have modes. They have chat mode, plan mode, and agent mode. And then they have this little thing that says chat might not work well with this model. So what they're trying to tell you is that they know certain models work well and certain ones don't. Now for chat, I can ask questions like I can say at code base. And I wish kind of we'd agree on some of the things and not have to remember that for Continue it's code base, for Visual Studio it's workspace, but maybe. Please examine this application and tell me what it does. Now you saw up there in the little drop down it said local. So this is using Olama on my machine and not going out to the internet. So let's go to here. And there you go. You see that spike in the GPU. So I've showed you now, you believe me that I'm using Olama. I don't have to keep going back and forth, right? Okay, that's great. So now I'm getting a Copilot-like experience in Visual Studio Code, but it's all on my machine, and everything I'm using in here is free. I just have to provide the hardware. Okay? Now, it tells me some information, and now I can come over here and I can go to agent mode. Now, for agent mode, you'll notice that there are different models I have available. Quinn Coders actually was one of the first ones that recently came out that was a good code completion model, which means when you come into your code, and let's go over here to our web app, let's go to the service. In here, I can start typing and I can get ghost text. Add a method to return the book count. Okay, notice down here in the bottom, it says continue, open parens, NE. That means next edit. And what happens is this stuff right here, this ghost text, is coming from that engine. So just like Copilot, I'm getting that same code completion model. So I can tab, accept, tab, and done. I got that same thing, but it's now running locally. So just like Copilot, they have a completion model they support, and then they support a different one for chatting, planning, and agent mode. And then I've got an extra error here, expected that. Oh, did I type it? I typed it outside the class. That's the problem. Brian wasn't paying attention. And that's the thing. AI won't save you from yourself if you're confused or complete vibe coder. So now if I come back over here though, I can tell it to do things like add methods to the service layer of the web app to find by author, name, book name, and support exact and partial matches. Done. So I'm going to do the same thing that I've done in the other tools. I'm going to say, go out and do something and update my code. So you can have that exact experience. So you can see what it's doing. It's saying, okay, this is what's going on. I'm going to go through and it looks like that warning, yes. Okay, so what it's telling me is that the model I picked is not good enough for what I want to do. And I swear that's what they told me to install. So let's try this one. So maybe I did the wrong one. So let's go back and find my statement. Let's copy it again. Let's go back down. Okay, you guys lied. Okay, I apologize. The model I installed, it told me it would work. It was 3.8 gig. It's not working right. But if you get the right model loaded, as you saw, you get completions. You can do agent mode with continue as well. Cursor. Cursor is an interesting product. Cursor really took the lead at showing what's possible if you really get some smart people and some good foundation tech. They cheated. They got their foundation tech from Microsoft and GitHub. They took a fork of Visual Studio Code and then they started building their AI features on top of it. That said, they've innovated on these features. It can be wicked fast, and it's a really great tool for web developers doing Python and JavaScript type projects. That said, its support for C# and .NET is good, but Microsoft has kind of put a legal block in them in that you can't use some of the C# plugins outside of Visual Studio Code due to the license. And let's be fair, Cursor is a $9 billion valued company that is using Microsoft's free stuff to then make money. So I'm not going to get into the politics of that, just be aware of that. I found that Cursor can be really fast, but then gets frustrating because I can't really debug. I have to go and use Visual Studio Code if I'm on my Mac or Visual Studio. Yes, you technically can debug, you can do it all from the CLI, but the whole point of using Cursor is that it's a really fast IDE for doing AI. Now, I have a friend who's ex-Microsoft, worked in the Azure team. He's got a startup going. He swears by Cursor. He loves it. You get to know it, and it's just wicked fast. Windsurf and Windsurf has some interesting flows and stuff. They got this new demo preview, or this new feature preview that they're doing. It's really nice as well. It works really with TypeScript and JavaScript. C# support is getting better. And again, it's more for that web crowd. And now there's these emerging editors that I just wanted to mention. Void, Zed, and SuperMaven are all interesting tools. You can see that SuperMaven currently only works with VS Code. But one of the things that we're seeing from these new ones is larger context windows. The context window is what gets affected when you do things like at workspace, then you throw a bunch of commands in there, right? It affects how much it can think about at once. I will tell you from experience in using Copilot or even Claude Code, it is always better to break down your work into manageable units. For example, let's say you were using an old .NET FX app that you want to upgrade to .NET 8, for example, or even .NET 10. But I'd do 8 first because there's a lot more training data on it. So you sit down and you go, upgrade this project from .NET FX to .NET 8 and get rid of .NET Remoting and make it use a REST interface. Boom, go. Could you do that? Sure. How was it going to work? It's going to go to pot. It's going to write a bunch of crappy code. You need to treat your agent and work with it in pieces. So larger context windows are useful, but you got to be careful. From the CLI tools, I kind of showed you how this works. The whole idea by having these CLIs is you're not stuck with the IDE. It means it's scriptable. It means it's something that can be used in a DevOps situation as part of your pipelines. And it means it's going to support agent mode. So the good news is all the big players have these new command line experiences that you can use. So Claude Code, what I'm using it with their reasoning capabilities, I like it a lot. Now, I want to go back over to Claude since I've got the slide up because I want to show you the next part of how I work with it. I've run out of time, so I knew I was going to be able to show the debug. But if we come back over here to Claude, if you're in the terminal, I will do the work. Now, the one thing I haven't done is I haven't tested. I haven't proved that this works. That's okay. But what I will do is I'll say, okay, how much context did I use? This shows me how much it used to actually do this work. And notice it's at this 154K out of 200K. So I'm using about 77% of the context window I have here. This is a 200,000 token context window. Some of the more advanced ones like Gemini have a 1,000,000 token context window. Think about how much you're trying to get done at once, because what will happen is they'll have to compact the context. When they compact the context, they have to lose some nuance, and it means you might not get as accurate results. The next thing is, what did this cost me? This demo cost me $2.55 because I'm using an API token. Model in Claude lets you control which AI model you can use. The default, which is Sonnet 4 or 5, which is $15 per million tokens. Opus, $75 per million tokens. Or Sonnet, $22 per 50 million tokens. Or HiQ, which is a lot cheaper, but may not be as good. And then finally, I like to do an export of what it did to a file. It gives me a history of all the interactions and commands. I use it for a learning tool for myself, something to help Claude in the future, because it can say, look at what you did already to kind of catch up. And then I save that and I commit that as part of my work. Okay? All the tools support similar stuff like this. They aren't all as advanced as Claude, but they're getting there as far as those feature sets. Codex is the one from OpenAI. Codex is pretty good. I'm not sold on it yet. I'm not willing to give up Claude, but it's pretty good. Gemini, also pretty good. And then Copilot CLI is out there. Copilot CLI is the most recent one to come out the door. They've got some work to do, but I'm confident they'll catch up very quickly. And then we have JetBrains, which has all of their stuff. Now, the interesting thing about JetBrains is you can use one set of AI across multiple languages and rich IDEs. And yes, Copilot works inside Rider, so if you want to do .NET, it works great there. It also works with in Visual Studio with ReSharper. And finally, they have their own Junie AI, as well as they integrate directly with Anthropic. So something to consider there as well. You get certain usage out of your, if you have a JetBrains subscription, or you can add on a monthly fee if you only license a particular IDE. When you think about this in the enterprise, think about security, compliance, government, and audit trails. Cursor is caught up on this. When they first came out, I couldn't recommend any enterprise customer use them because they made no guarantees about privacy. They made no guarantees about compliance. Cursor is still a bit of a lot of these smaller companies are definitely in startup mode compared to Microsoft and some of the bigger companies when it comes to compliance and protecting you and giving you those guarantees. When you first start Cursor, they'll say, oh, hey, we want to train on all your data and all the stuff you're doing. You can turn it off in privacy, but they make you turn it on when you first start. And then you got to turn it on. Now, this was through a consumer activation. I didn't activate through their enterprise plan, so it may be different. But make sure no matter what vendor you look at, that you look at what their guarantees and compliance are. In the case of Copilot, they maintain an entire site called the Trust Center that documents all of it. And of course, Microsoft is backing it through their compliance. So when you start making your decisions and thinking about your evaluation criteria, here's the things you need to look at. Everything from IDE to budget, your use case complexity. I have tried them all and found different degrees of goodness. If I had to pay for only one, it'd be Copilot. If I could pay for two, and by the way, I pay for almost all of them. The one I use the most that I spend money on is Claude, Anthropic. Today, those are the two best for me, okay? I love Copilot because I get access to so many models, and now I'm gonna get access to agents, and I'm gonna get access to agents that use Claude, that use Codex. And then I put my money where my mouth is, and I use the API key for a lot of my stuff with Claude as well. That's my opinion. They're as good as anybody else's body part. You got to test it. You got to go through and do it. Evaluate compatibility, language, integration with Microsoft, and what type of security do you have to consider. Take a look at what's going on. I got pitfalls and strategies you can look at. I'm out of time. Slides will be available on the website at the end of this week. I got more data you can take home. Check your metrics. Key takeaways and action items. I got even more information. There's some predictions. I'll let you look at those on your own. At the end of the day, the bottom line is there's no right way to embrace AI other than embrace it as a companion, as a co-pilot, not as a replacement for you and your brain. Don't go vibe coding with your production code. Don't go YOLO. Test how the agent interacts. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Be good humans.